So we're just going to take a look at the order of operations with some fraction problems, and that's going to help us just brush up on the fraction algorithms. So I'm not going to draw any pictures here. I'm just going to make calculations without using a calculator. And there's going to be at least one test question where I say, hey, here's a bunch of fraction problems, and I just want you to show work on how you would do it. So that's kind of like what I'm doing here right now. So suppose I had 2 1/3 plus 3 1/2 divided by 2. So this is an interesting one to look at because I got some mixed numbers going on here. I've got an addition, I've got a division, and a mixed number really is another addition going on there. In this case, if you add 2 numbers and divide by 2, it's finding the average. So this one is a pretty practical application. This would give me the average of the 2 numbers, or the number right in the middle of them. So I mentioned before, when you're working with fractions, mixed numbers are kind of a pain in the butt. The easiest thing to do is make them improper. So 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7/3, plus 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7/2 over 2. And whenever we have a big fraction bar like this, there's a hidden parentheses that says, hey, you got to do the numerator before you can do the denominator. So don't go try to cancel this 2 with anything. That's totally illegal because it violates the order of operations. And it's implied that there's a parentheses there, even though it's not written. So algorithm here I would apply is just the arrow algorithm. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 7 is 14, 3 times 7 is 21, and we're adding. So then 14 and 21 is 35 over 6, and then we have to divide that by 2. And then we have our division idea with fractions is multiplied by the reciprocal, so this is 35/6 times 1/2, because 1/2 is the reciprocal of 2. 35 times 1 is 35. 6 times 2 is 12. And so that's one possible answer here, although I should see, does this reduce? So we still want to check that. The only way to know if it reduces is to just like recognize it, or otherwise you have to factor these to see if it reduces. So if these numbers are big enough that I'm not really sure, my only choice is to make a factor tree for 35. So let's say I would say 5 goes into 35 7 times. 5 and 7 are prime. 12 is maybe 3 times 4, and 4 is 2 times 2. And so I can see they have no common factors. So this is reduced, and that is a totally cool answer right there. So that 35/12 is the average of 2 1/3 times 3 1/2. Now some people might look at that and say, well, it's not a mixed number. So what? Doesn't have to be. If you're dying for a mixed number, then take 12 into 35 for an alternative answer. Let's see, twice but not 3 times. 24, remainder is 11. So then another way to state the average in addition to 35/12 would be 2 and 11/12 would be the number in the middle of those 2 fractions right there. Questions on this example? Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat, so we'll do one more example and then we're out of time for fun today. Let's take 5/12 plus 1/2 times 1/3 minus 1/4. All right, what should we do first here?
Parentheses.
Definitely parentheses. So that means we got to figure out what's going on in here. Easiest way to subtract fractions is the arrow algorithm. So 3 times 4 is 12. 4 times 1 is 4. 3 times 1 is 3, and we're subtracting. So then inside my parentheses, what I really have is 4 minus 3 is 1 over 12. And then I bring the other stuff back in. All right, what should we do next? Okay, 2 choices, add or multiply. For a suggestion.
Multiply?
Yeah, rock on. Next, we're going to have to do the multiplication. Yeah, multiplication has to happen before addition. It's tempting to do that addition first because adding a half's not too bad, but no, we can't. We got to multiply. So multiplication, pretty straightforward. Arrow across the top and bottom. So now we have 1 out of 24. And finally, we can add. Now here, although the arrow algorithm tends to be easier, I'm looking at this and saying, but 12 goes into 24. So in this case, the LCD algorithm is a little easier because I can just double top and bottom of this one. So my common denominator is, oops, not 12 anymore, it's 24. And I have 10 plus 1 or 11/24. Now, I do think it's important that people know how to do these by hand, but it's also important we know how to do these on a calculator. So in my last couple minutes, I'm just going to plug this into a couple different calculators to see how the calculators work. And my guess is when you've been doing the homework, you've been whipping out your calculator regularly, and that's awesome. But again, we also need to know how to do it without as teachers. So let's go to Desmos is a nice calculator. It behaves like some of the scientific calculators from TI and Casio that have fraction buttons, which make life a little bit easier. So in Desmos, I just say, hey, I want a fraction. The first fraction is 5/12. And I just type what I see. So the next would be plus 1/2. And one cool thing about Desmos, it just kind of always assumes you want a fraction when you hit division. And so I had hit the division key and it made me a fraction. And then I want to go times parentheses. A lot of calculators are okay not having the times there, but some freak out without it. So you always got to check. And then it was 1/3 minus 1/4. And one thing to note, you got to be careful with some of these that have these fraction buttons, because sometimes when you start typing, you could end up typing in the wrong spot. So certain calculators now that are smartphone apps, they have these arrows to move around and out of a denominator. And so we definitely have to train ourselves and kids how to answer. Now the default is to give me a decimal, but I could ask for a fraction also. And again, a lot of regular handheld calculators do have that option to toggle back and forth between fraction and decimal answers, which is kind of nice. So this calculator here works pretty nice. I can type it as I see it, as long as I learn how to type it properly. So that's not bad. Not all calculators have that fraction capability, so it could be we or some student might not have one. So for example, if you have an Android phone and you use the calculator on your Android phone, it's gonna look a lot like this one right here. And typing fractions on this, there isn't a fraction button anywhere. I have to use division. So I'm gonna try to type the problem we just had. It was 5/12. So there's my 5/12. And then this does have parentheses, so I should be able to type the whole thing. Plus 1 divided by 2 would be my 1/2. And then I would have to go times my parentheses. And then 1 divided by 3 minus 1 divided by 4. So I can play with fractions by using division if I use parentheses correctly. Now this one was pretty straightforward. I didn't have to do much, but almost type it as I see it. Instead of a fraction, I have that division symbol there. So there's my 5/12, there's my 1/2, there's my 1/3, and there's my 1/4. And the question is, well, how do you learn how your calculator works? And the the way you learn is you do something the way you think it ought to work on paper, and then try to get your calculator to reproduce the result. Now here, notice it gives me a decimal answer. There isn't a convert to fraction option. So I would make a note on my paper that as a decimal, this says 0.458 and a bunch of threes. And then I would check what I thought the answer was. So I thought the answer was 11/12. So I'm just going to see, okay, 2 ways to go from here. I could just type 11/12 and see if it gives me, oops, it was supposed to be 11/24, wasn't it? 11/24, and see if, I can't type today. One more time, 11/24. Okay, so there's that 0.583, blah, blah, blah. Another way to kind of trick the calculator to give me some fraction stuff is, I think the answer is 11/24. I did the calculation and got 0.58333. The decimal comes from the denominator, really. And so if I were to multiply that decimal by the denominator, it should tell me what the numerator is. And so there it's 11. And we played around that with that idea when we were trying to do fraction, quotients, and remainders way back last quarter when we did division of whole numbers. So learning to use a calculator to do fractions is important. It's easier to have a fraction calculator, and a lot of schools have sets of those for students to use. And so learning how to use them, how they relate to things you do on paper is pretty important too. All right, so that's it for math at the moment. Back to the home page for a sec. I need to catch up on grading today and tomorrow. So I haven't finished the addition activity or the multiplication activity. So if you haven't turned those in, turn them in today. There isn't a division activity, although we did look at how to use the toys to do division. We'll do some more review on Wednesday. We may or may not use the whole class time. And then I'm going to post here an exam place for you to submit exam work. Your exam is going to be a Google Doc. And the way you'll do it is you'll just take problem number 1 on that page and write it down on paper. And ultimately, you'll take pictures of your work and upload them. If you want to retype stuff in Google Docs, that's cool too. If you want to put pictures of your work in Google Docs, that's fine. So it'll work so that it'll be kind of like the activities, your exam. When you open it up, I'll have a link to the Google Doc, and then there'll be a, let's go to student view, where's that? So I'll have a link to the Google Doc on the top of the exam page, and then you can either submit and upload pictures, text entry, you can also put pictures in there. If you haven't put pictures in one of these boxes before, you should embed them and not attach them, like the file upload. I think this is easier, because then I can put a whole bunch of pictures in one page. To do that, you would go to embed image, and then you have to switch to Canvas, My Files, and that allows you to upload anything you want. So you could upload 5, 6, 7, 10 pictures right in this box right here once you switch to Canvas, My Files, and then you can upload whatever you want. So more on that Wednesday when we meet again. And what I'll probably do is I'll post the exam tomorrow, so you'll see again on the home page. So a new section down here that says exam 1, and there'll just be one thing in it, and it'll be the exam. So it won't be like the homework where you type answers in a little box. It'll be write everything on paper and then submit your paper, or type it up in a Google Doc and submit your Google Doc. You can go either way. All right, that's it for now. Good luck getting your work done, and I'll review some more with you on Wednesday. Have a great day.